Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. My name is Hafsa Siddiqui and I'm your host for YATA Talks Canada. Today our guest is Brother Omar Zia, who is an active individual with the youth in the community and is very active with the entire community as a whole. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, so tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do in the community.
So by profession, I'm a high school guidance counselor and I work in the region of Peel. And through that process, I help a lot of students in different facets of life, whether it's career education or helping them with their own identities and their understanding of who they are and their purpose in life. In the community, I'm also involved with Nasiha Muslim Youth Helpline, and through that organization, I am their education outreach manager. And so I work with teachers and with school boards at the Islamic schools and public school systems as well to help educate their teachers and their administrators on how to connect with their students, whether it be developing resources around Islamophobia or understanding what the identity of Muslim really means in a public setting and within the North American dialogue as well, and then helping teachers develop resources that will help them in their curricular areas as well. I'm also involved with a few masajids in giving parenting workshops to help parents connect with their kids in this 21st century. A lot of parents are having difficulty, especially with teenagers, making that connection, and that's normal, I think, in most areas in the world. But at the same time, I think a lot of parents are not really prepared for what their kids are going through now, what they're being exposed to now versus 10, 15, even 20 years ago. I know myself as a parent that what my children are exposed to now is much different than when I was growing up. And I'm born and raised in Canada. So, some parents might have that assumption that just because you're born, that because you're born in the area where you've grown up in that culture, you might have the understanding that as a parent, you'll know better how to deal with your kids than my immigrant parents knew how to deal with me. But in fact, I find that I almost feel like an immigrant, a technological immigrant.
Of course.
Here as well.
So you yourself, you're a very active individual, as I said before. So the topic today, it's actually quite a heavy one, which is, I think, mentioned in almost every media channel, mentioned all the time, every day, and it's Islamophobia and what is Islamophobia and how Islamophobia affects us today. So just what would you say is Islamophobia?
The easiest way, I think, for most viewers to understand Islamophobia is how the Anti-Racist Directorate within the Ministry of Education Ontario described it as racism. Okay, so there's a technological definition to what Islamophobia is, which includes the irrational fear of Muslims and Islam as a religion, without understanding exactly what Islam is and what it represents. That's Islamophobia in a nutshell. What it looks like and sounds like and feels like is very different, though.
Would you say Islamophobia today is real? Few people say we've come to equality in this nation that we live in. Do you say Islamophobia is real? Do we see it every day?
I would say that we see racism every single day, no matter where we are, whether it's targeted to Muslims, to Jews, to our indigenous Canadians as well. We see it against black people as well, or people of African Canadian heritage. Okay, so racism is alive and well, no matter where we are, whether in Canada or around the globe. Islamophobia specifically, yes, it's prevalent, whether it be in our school settings, whether it be in our institutions of higher education, in the workplace as well. And we may also find that Islamophobia exists in the media, or what the media reports on, in terms of what's happening around us.
Would you say that there is, what are some instances of Islamophobia today?
In this past year in the Peel District School Board, we've actually been dealing with a lot with Islamophobia at our board meeting offices. Earlier this year, at the beginning of the school year, the board had decided to rewrite some of the policies around the accommodations for religious practices in our school board, specific to the Friday prayer that students who identify as Muslims were participating in. And as a result of some of the decisions that were made at the board office, a number of Islamophobic people actually attended the board meetings and berated the trustees and the superintendents and used a number of vulgar terms to describe Muslims and practices within Islam. And at one point, a person actually stood up with the Quran, ripped it apart, and threw it on the ground, and then proceeded to step on it as well. So yes, this is a good example of Islamophobia.
Of course. So it's terrible that these kinds of things happen today. It's kind of almost incredible that it happens in a bad, sickening kind of way. But would you say that it's justified, this kind of sense of fear and intimidation of Muslims? Some people say it's justified, some people say there's no reason. Would you say that there are some things that justify fear about Islam and Islamophobia?
There's no justification about Islamophobia itself. Islam is a religion that does preach peace. It is a very fundamental core understanding, and those who have read the Quran and understood what it preaches will understand that it preaches peace. Those who have read through the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, will understand for sure that he also lived a life of peace as well. He was also a politician, he was also an army general as well, so we have to take the whole of his life as fully encompassing to understand. Now, what about fear of, should Muslims be afraid of Islamophobia within their societies? And I would say yes. I just mentioned the example at the Appeal Board office. You can imagine any Muslim watching that, especially students, are very vulnerable in our society, watching that occur and play out in front of their eyes over a period of not just once or twice, but weeks and months for the whole school year, feeling themselves threatened, even to the point where some of these haters, Islamophobes, showed up at the high school in Peel, trying to intimidate parents and students as they're exiting the school. Fear can also take another role as well. There have been a few incidences here in the Peel region, within Mississauga, of assaults happening, where a Muslim woman was accosted by several males, and her hijab was attempted to be torn off, and she was physically assaulted. There's also been incidents of males also being assaulted by another group of males, being called Islamophobic type of slurs and vulgar terms at the time of assault as well. So fear is creeping into our society. I don't think we should, I'm not advocating that we should walk around in a state of fear. We should always be hopeful. At the same time, I think that everybody, no matter who they are, any sort of racialized minority, always should be living with some state of consciousness about their surroundings and being aware of where they are at all times and protecting themselves and their families as best as possible.
Of course. So where does this fear come from? Because fear doesn't come from nowhere. Is it something that is happening in the Muslim community that causes outside communities to be fearful, or even Muslims in the Muslim community to be fearful and hateful towards one another?
It's a good question. I think that when we look at hate in general, that's what the question we should be asking. Where does hate generate from? And why is that hate currently directed towards Muslims? What we need to keep in mind is that we're living in Canada, and while Islamophobia is a hot topic and we as Muslims are super sensitive to the topic of Islamophobia, we're actually not the number one recipients of racism. In fact, the ones who are the one most racialized group within Canada that is receiving the most amount of racism, the most amount of vulgarity thrown upon them are actually the indigenous peoples. Second would then be Jews. And then you'd have black people, and eventually you'd have Muslims as well. So we do have, to understand that we're part of a larger society, and racism is part of the whole society, not just for Muslims itself. So where does hate generate from? Hate generates with fear of the other, fear of the unknown, right? And so in order for us to battle fear and to extinguish hate, I'm a teacher, and so my default answer would be to educate. To educate, and to educate some more. To understand Islam socially, economically, the fundamentals of belief about Islam, so that people can start to see the similarities and the commonalities that we have with each other and the intersectionalities that we have with each other.
Of course.
Right? And one way to bridge those gaps is to look at some of those intersectionalities. A person can be black and Muslim. A person can be indigenous and Muslim. So there's a lot of intersectionalities that we can start bridging together and bridge buildings of understanding, build bridges of community, where people can start to understand each other's differences as commonalities. I remember when I was young, one of the multicultural promotion ads that used to happen in the 80s here in Canada was a statement that said, what we all have in common is that we're all different.
So what would you say the youth can do, Muslim youth can do, to kind of get rid of prejudices or get rid of the kind of stigma Islamophobia has?
So why is Islamophobia have these stigmas? It's really because of either lack of education or misdirection or misinformation in general. So what can the youth do? One of the advantages that youth have are smartphones. We have access to a variety of social media apps that are available where youth are very adept at using. And so what I encourage young Muslims to do is to start rewriting the social narrative that's out there. Right? Give their first-hand experience as to what does it mean to be Muslim in this day and age and within this cultural context in which they live.
How can the Muslim youth and non-Muslim youth kind of come together to clear up misconceptions, like you said, social media? how can we reach out to other communities to say, hey, this is how we are. We want to learn about each other.
So there are many interfaith councils that exist, I would say, in the adult world, and there's nothing stopping young people from getting involved in the same types of councils as well. So even at a high school setting, there's nothing wrong with having interfaith meetings, interfaith gatherings in the high school setting. An MSA can work with a Christian fellowship, for example, and have a common event and talk about some of the commonalities that people have in religion. The story of Prophet Ibrahim is a great example of how Jews, Muslims, and Christians can come together to build bridges of understanding. Within the cultural context of Peel, we have a lot of students who belong to the Sikh faith as well as the Hindu faith, and there's a lot of commonalities among South Asians where they can come together. It might sound strange to hear this, but Diwali originally is a holiday that was established in the Punjab to bring together Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and even Christians around the harvest. So to look beyond the to look beyond the faith differences and look at the faith commonalities, the basic humanism of being a human being. And this is a good example of how we can all come together.
So you spoke earlier about, in our previous segments, finding similarity and difference. So how can the youth and the adult world, kind of cooperate together to get rid of misconceptions and stigmas?
It's a good question. I think this is a place where families can come together. One of the best things or greatest things about Islam is that it's a diaspora, meaning that there are so many different types of Muslims and so many levels of practicing within Islam that people with the Muslim identity hold fast to. And so even amongst the Muslim generations and Muslim families, we have different and varying levels of practice and understanding of different aspects of the religion. So we need to talk with each other as families to understand what the basic commonality, what's the most basic common denominator for all Muslims, and then work together in our families to then present that to the world. One of the greatest ways that Muslim families or adults can mentor and coach the youth is through the concept of sadaqah, giving in charity. And that doesn't mean giving in money. I'm not talking about zakah, I'm talking about sadaqah, which is giving in our time, giving in our manners, our emotions, being there for people physically, emotionally, and socially. And for our neighbors, perhaps in the winter time, can you imagine a whole Muslim family going around and assisting the senior citizens with wiping off their cars or helping shovel their driveways, or in the summertime helping with mowing their lawn or helping people carrying groceries? What if Muslim families together, adults mentoring and coaching and role modeling for youth, helping in the community? I'll give you a good example of that, where I used to, when I went to Teachers College in Kingston, Ontario, the MSA, working with the Muslim Student Association from the university, working with a lot of the Muslim youth and the adults within the masjid, built a whole flower bed in front of the masjid and took on the concept of ecology in a very sincere manner, celebrating Earth Day, not just with the masjid, but the neighboring churches as well.
Of course. So, just wrapping up, what would your message be to the youth, to the people who suffer from Islamophobia or they have seen instances of Islamophobia every day? So what would you say to the youth as you kind of a wrap up?
I think that's what I would say to youth is that if you have been a victim of Islamophobia, and that doesn't mean directly, it could also be indirectly. You've seen it, you've heard it, you've seen someone affected by it, you've heard someone else's story, that can also affect a person. You've heard media stories about Islamophobic incidents that are occurring anywhere else in the world, that definitely affects a person. So if you are being affected by Islamophobia, then reach out to a place like Nasiha Muslim Youth Helpline to seek advice, to get, to vent out your frustrations, connect with the adults in your home, whether it be your parents, your elder siblings, or in your larger family setting. Reach out and continue to hold on to that identity, what it means to be Muslim. Continue to take advantage of your own youth through social media to rewrite that social narrative. Take time to learn what actually is the narrative. What does it mean to be Muslim? When we carry that identity of Muslim, what does it actually mean to us? What does being Muslim look like, sound like, and feel like to us as individuals? And how do we portray that to the outside world as well? In Islamophobia, when we're being attacked about who we are and what our identity really is, this is the best time for every individual, whether they be young or old or man or woman, it doesn't make a difference. This is the best time to rediscover what it means to be Muslim and rediscover what that means for ourselves. And what I found as a guidance counselor in my work with youth, is that I would use the word from born again or reversion to back to the fundamentals of what it means to be Muslim. And I found a lot of youth rediscovering and redefining for themselves what does it mean to have my name, to have my culture, to pray, to give in a charity, and so on and so forth. How does this actually play out in day-to-day life? So I would say that this is a time for youth to take advantage of when people attack us, to turn that against them by becoming stronger ourselves, stronger as human beings and stronger as Muslims.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have intelligent guests like yourself, so thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you're interested in getting in contact with Brother Omar Zia, his contact will be below. Please subscribe to us, please leave comments, and we always appreciate your questions. I'm your host, Hafsa Siddiqui for YATA Talks Canada.